Okay, so manic depressive. I've just been making my little comedy clips, and why? Well, it's mostly because I have to have something to do, and either I can sit in front of the television and watch, or I can look into my camera and talk. And I just enjoy talking into the camera more than sitting in front of Netflix. Just the way it is. Okay, what else do we talk? It just came on my Facebook feed. Michio Kaku, who is a well-known scientist, was on with some major news organization, and he was talking about technologies that are kind of being hidden from us. So I'm going to disclose what they are. Very high-powered trillion-watt lasers. Okay, if you got a trillion-watt laser, do you think that could be turned into an energy weapon? People have been wondering about the weird reports of weird fires in California, and people were saying directed energy weapon. Well, yes, that's what he was talking about, trillion watt, and even the Navy has have had reports about using these particle beam weapons. That's not particle beam. That's a different kind of beam. Laser beam is not a particle beam. Just so you know, in physics, laser is light. Particle beams are particles of, well, they're not popcorn particles. They're most likely things like, if you took an atom and you stripped off the electrons could be a particle beam. And the other stuff that's left over when you take the electrons away are going to be like a neutron and a proton. And that could also be used. You could send that at high speed, and that would be a particle beam. So we had 1,000-watt lasers. Michio Kaku said Kaku said if you aim it up into the sky, you can make clouds and rain. And he said the CIA allegedly did this back during around 1970, the Vietnam War, to create monsoons. That one I don't think is true, because these high-powered lasers were not openly known about in 1970. I suppose it doesn't mean they didn't exist. Why? Well, it's just, here's the thing. To the public knowledge, in mid-1980s, Ronald Reagan, President Reagan said, Reagan, President Reagan. You see, it's a play on words. Ronald Reagan had the Star Wars initiative, which was going to be using these kind of laser weapons and particle beam weapons. And he announced research was going to start, during Reagan's presidency in the 1980s. But if they already had this stuff in the 1980s, they were not letting us know. So for me, given the knowledge that I knew publicly back in 1980s, I would have said the chance that they had trillion-watt lasers creating monsoons in the Vietnam War was zero. Zero. So, but, the thing is that in those days, the military had, and the government kept us in the dark about everything. Well, nothing's really changed, but they didn't tell us a lot of things because they didn't want the enemy, which were like the Russians and the Chinese and the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. They didn't want them to find out what the U.S. had in those days. So they might have had technologies that they just weren't talking about. So I can't say for sure. This is the problem with government keeping secrets. Is it a problem or not? Well, we just don't know the truth. And when are we ever going to know the truth? Because they're holding out on us for our protection from Russians, Chinese, North Koreans, Martians, Draco-reptilians, Arcturians, Palladians, the Great Gazoo, who was a comic character who was an extraterrestrial who bothered Fred Flintstone, another comic character. But the whole point is they have a defense department and they need to be able to defend, and that's what they want to use. So what else can we talk about these high-powered lasers? Someone says there's a maser. They talked about lasers and masers, but we never know nothing about masers. So lasers was light amplification. Masers would be, I believe, magnetic amplification machines. What can you do with a magnetic? I don't know. We always hear about lasers. We never hear about masers. What research went into masers? We know magnetics, high-powered magnetics. You get magnetic levitation trains. What else have they done with it? Rail guns that don't send particles, don't send light. They send pieces of metal, for example. A piece of metal maybe the size of my smartphone here, or maybe bigger. They put it onto a rail, which is a long track, and they use a lot of electricity to generate an enormous magnetic field, and the magnetic field has an effect on the iron in the projectile, and you could have an enormous projectile descend, that kind of stuff, as a weapon. But we never hear about it, but we've heard of rail guns on the Navy. Okay, what else? HARP. High altitude, something or other. HARP. It was a big conspiracy theory for a long time. When did I first hear about HARP? I don't know. Let's say 1990s, 2000s. I could be wrong, but around that time, more or less. And it was an enormous installation in Alaska. And they took a lot of energy, took a whole pile of energy, and they beamed energy up into the sky for experimental purposes. But weather control was what the conspiracy theory people talked about. And they also said it could create earthquakes. So weather control, so like the polar vortex, could be man-made using HARP. And, what else could they do? Well, they could create a drought in California. In other words, it's quite likely that, given what scientist Michio Kaku said, it could be that they're doing all this stuff. Could be not. Officially, they said they shut down HARP. But maybe they miniaturized it and they put it on a Navy ship somewhere. Or maybe they took it into space. I don't know. I'm a civilian and I'm only piecing together this stuff. This particular clip I found, it was on my YouTube feed, and it was an Alex Jones production. But it certainly looked like the clips of Maku, whatever the scientist, Cuckoo, looked like it was like mainstream TV. Anyway, I'm wearing my Vans Off the Wall t-shirt because this stuff, if you think this is off the wall, then you're so far behind. How much sure am I of this stuff is real? I'm going to go with how much of the total amount that I told you is real? 100% sure. 100% sure that everything I told you is true. How much would I bet on it? Well, who's going to take my bet and how are you going to prove it? This is the problem. But, I'm 100% sure this is coffee, and so I'm going to drink it. There you have it. There you have it. There's coffee, and I'm 100% sure it's coffee. because I'm brewed it myself. How much? Why do I say 100%? Because it's just been on the news for so long, so many decades of this information. Have you ever seen a gun be shot? Yes, I have. So I know that guns are real. Have I seen these other things? Just on TV and, YouTube and things. But I know a gun shoots. So I know that an artillery piece shoots. I've seen those little handheld lasers that are, this size, that are made in China, and they were causing a lot of trouble because people were aiming them at airplanes flying over. So I know lasers are real. Trillion watts, I don't know how much power, that's an unbelievable amount of power. But, we have nuclear power plants that can produce an unbelievable amount of power. And we have national grids where you tie a bunch of power plants together. They use a lot of power at CERN. I don't know how much. But then you have, primitive ways of storing a lot of charge are capacitors. Advanced ways of storing an enormous amount of charge is, I don't know. Are there ways? I'm sure that they've been, because for these railguns, they have to store an enormous amount of electricity for a blast. They don't need a magnetic field very long for the railgun. It only has to be on for I don't know. How long would it take to get the railgun fired up? Maybe it takes 15 seconds. Maybe it's instantaneous. Maybe you just flip the switch, you press the trigger, and it instantly just charges it up. But, what we know from civilian versus what we know from the military, just piece it all together from a civilian standpoint, and you can bet your bottom dollar that these things are real. So what do we want to do? Well, we don't want any more polar vortex. We're sick of that, so we want that stopped. And we don't want any more droughts. The thing is, what would our weather be like if we didn't have these people using weather control? How long has this been going on? Maybe the natural planet has got perfect weather and it doesn't need to be fucked with. Maybe the Russians and the Chinese have got these things and they're making bad weather. Maybe they're making the polar vortex so we could have a weather war or something. But, if we give up using our weather warfare, then and they don't, then, don't have the balance of power. I'm almost done. One more thing I want to talk about is bad coffee. No, my coffee is not bad. It's Maxwell House. Dream big. I've had better coffee, but, as an everyday coffee, that's on a scale of 1 to 10, we're going to go with the coffee on a scale of 1 to 10. As far as taste goes, it's a little bit cold. It's a little bit old. We're going to go for a 6 out of 10. At what point won't I drink coffee? If coffee on a scale of 1 to 10 is 2 or under, I won't drink it. I've got pretty good coffee taste.